Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here. The Committee on Executive Management will come to order. Present are myself, Council Members Cordero, Kia'aina, and Se. Also present, Val Okimoto, Councilmember Okimoto, as a non-voting member. Councilmember Wire is excused from today's meeting. I have a few announcements to make before we start. Although remote oral testimony is being permitted, this is a regular in-person meeting and not a remote meeting by interactive conference technology under HRS Section 92-3.7. Therefore, the meeting will continue notwithstanding loss of audio-visual communication with remote testifiers or loss of the public broadcast of the meeting. Members of the public will be allowed to provide oral testimony on all items on the agenda in two ways, remotely and in person in council chamber. Remote and in-person oral testimony will be allowed when the agenda item is taken up. Before testifying, each person shall state their name. Each speaker may not have anyone else read their statement and is limited to a 1-minute presentation on each item. All persons who have registered to testify remotely by video conference will be called upon first. When your name is called, please monitor your screen and activate your audio feed when prompted. I will then give persons who have not registered an opportunity to testify. Please utilize the raise hand feature in Zoom to be called on. For those joining us by telephone only, please press *9 to indicate your desire to speak. I will identify you by the last 3 digits of your phone number. When your number is called, please press *6 to unmute yourself when prompted. Some friendly reminders and tips. Video conference from a quiet location if possible. If you are also watching the proceeding on Olelo, please mute your television at the time you are called to testify. When the timer on the screen reaches 0, please conclude your remarks promptly. Once all the remote testifiers have testified, I will proceed to in-person testimony in the council chamber. Persons who have not registered will be given an opportunity to speak following the oral testimonies of the registered speakers. Written testimonies, including the testifier's address, email address, and phone number, will be available to the public as described on the agenda. As a courtesy, please turn off all cell phones. Turning to the agenda, members, for action, Resolution 24-12, urging the city's first responder agencies to develop a reasonable and effective policy and measure regarding media and public access to dispatcher radio communications that balance the interests of the public with the needs of respective agencies. Members, we have a hand-carried CD1. Do you have the number? It's identified as OCS, thank you, OCS number 2024-00324/1/11/2024, dated 10:28 a.m. Basically, I received a request from the police department with suggested amendments, so that is basically memorialized here. Members, you should have it on your desk before adoption. I will read into the record after discussion exactly what it does, but I wanted to give the chief an opportunity to address that as well. Before we start with the public, I do note that we do have a lot of, we actually have the police chief, fire chief, head of the law enforcement division, as well as the ambulance, Director Ireland. So, Chief, shall we start with you? Aloha and welcome, and thank you so much for being here today.
Aloha, thank you for the opportunity to be here. Chair Waters, Vice Chair Kia'aina, council members, thank you for the opportunity. I wanted to provide remarks for today but also for the opportunity to provide suggestions and suggested amendments to the current resolution. Mahalo to all of you and your constituents for the well wishes and support for our officers who were injured as a result of January 1st, as well as the many of the public who expressed their support and thank yous to our HPD sworn and non-sworn personnel. As we all know, the vision of the Honolulu Police Department is let us be revered in our mission to guard the people. This vision helps guide our decisions and our reason for your officers who place their lives in the line every day. To perform this mission with the vision in mind, your police officers utilize radio communications to transmit vital information with each other, authorized agencies, and the communications division. Providing live access to radio communications does not enhance our ability to guard the people. It will, in fact, hinder it. To be clear, I'm not opposed to providing information to the public. What I can support is providing access. What I can't support is providing access to the radio systems that is used by the city first responders and is interoperable with our military and our multiple state and federal agencies. Radio transmissions provide real-time information on first responder movements and available equipment and resources, which we rely on for operational purposes. Every day, our officers are sent to assist the people who are in their most vulnerable states. These are juveniles and adults in crisis. These are victims of violent crime and domestic violence and sex assault victims. We are sent to domestic violence shelters and residential homes where victims and witnesses are being protected. We are sent to meet with people who, although fearful for their own personal safety, have the courage and strong sense of civic duty to report an incident and be a witness. Sensitive information about all of these individuals include their location, their names, their phone numbers, and all of this information is broadcast over the radio. The release of such information potentially places them at risk and exposes facility locations such as shelters that rely on confidentiality for security. Further, police radios are routinely used to transmit criminal background information utilizing national databases. The Department of Justice requires that criminal history information pulled from these very databases be kept confidential. Non-compliance with this policy can lead to severe sanctions on the department, including being denied access to the databases which we rely on in the field. Thankfully, the vast majority of our citizens do not have criminal records or warrants. However, we all have cell phones, home addresses, social security numbers, relatives' names, and other personal information. This information is known as personal identifiable information, or PII, which our officers routinely transmit over the radio when handling calls and working on cases. The DOJ policy limits this information on individuals and only have authorized access. Once we realize the potential dangers a suspect posed to the public, we should have released, pardon me, let me back up there. Today, there are many criminal actors looking to gather PII for nefarious operations. There are also times when our officers have to transmit health and medical information regarding arrestees, victim, or suspect, and the information would fall under the Medical Privacy Act or HIPAA. While this information greatly impacts HFD and our EMS, but it also impacts our transmissions as well. Looking back on New Year's Day, I know that we can do better in communicating with the public. Once we realize the potential danger in the suspect posed to the public, we should have released general information. We've started discussing our response on that day and how we can improve internal operations and communications. We currently email notifications to the media 24/7 for serious incidents and post all our active calls on our website that's available to the public. We are committed to using more social media and HPD personnel to push out timely information as well as safety alerts. We will be expanding the department's use of social media and provide information on a 24/7 basis. We believe that these changes best address the need for the public to be informed in a timely manner, as well as the need to protect sensitive information about our victims, witnesses, juveniles, and our officers. Mahalo.
Thank you, Chief. And before I open up to questions, I want to just thank you and the department for all your hard work. And ultimately, other than the two officers who were hurt, and please send our thanks to them as well. But I guess the concern is that it could have gone a lot worse than it did. And thank goodness and thank God that it didn't. And that's really the reason why we're here today, right? And I thank you for acknowledging that we could all do better, right? And that your willingness to work with us and with the media to get timely, accurate, and helpful information, both to the department but also to the public. Because ultimately, what one thing I thought of while this was happening on New Year's Day was that had I myself or my family had timely, accurate information, I have two young kids. My daughter was home from college. That I would have called them and told them to come home or shelter in place, or my in-laws who may have been outside walking to go indoors, right? But having said that, members, any questions for our chief? Councilmember Cordero? No? No, go ahead. Okay. Members, any questions for the chief? Okay, I'll start. So I know you acknowledge that you think that we could have done a better job of getting the information out to the public. What would that look like? How do you think that could have been done better?
Well, I think one of the things is what I said is providing more personnel from within the department to come into the office, immediately start putting together information, working with, in discussions with the chief of the fire department and EMS, Dr. Island, and our emergency management system, or DEM. How do we push out alerts either through the wireless system or through a banner system on your television, right? So how can we do all of that? So that's the conversations we've been having. So what it would look like on that day is having individuals coming to work, have pre-canned information that we can punch out through the DEM service to get onto the television and out on social media or on a wireless alert broadcast on your cell phone. That something is happening. So that's how that would work. There still needs some work to do on how to do that in the future. But it's our ability to call people into the office. It's unfortunate that it happened, or fortunate that it happened on this day of New Year's Day, which was a holiday. And that played in the dynamics of what happened that day. And really the beneficial of less people being out and about, but more people being home, spending New Year's Day with their families, although not everyone. And so I think in that aspect of getting more people to the office quicker, being able to get information out, or working from home, but being able to do that through a leadership of processing information, understanding the situation, and then passing that information out, the available information that we could pass out.
Thank you. I mean, that's the key point. What's the available information that you can point out or pass out? But I did read the active shooter protocols on your website, and it's pretty detailed as far as what the department does with regard to dealing with this. But it didn't really address the issue of getting information out to the public. And that's really what I'm focusing on. And by the way, I did, in preparation for today, interview the Star Advertiser as well as one of the news reporters, and hopefully they're here to testify today. But I think initially the 717 report that came from the police department was Honolulu police responded to a report of an aggravated assault on eastbound airport exit from the freeway. Police closed the exit as they investigated. But it was more than an aggravated assault, right? Wasn't the victim shot by the perpetrator?
But that's the definition of aggravated assault, yes.
I see. But at that point, though, the police department knew that there was an active shooter out there, right?
There was an individual, yes, that shot at an individual. Why, we don't know yet. The whole reason behind it was what the investigation needs to evolve before we can pass out and that we have a person roaming around shooting at other people. It was only that one individual specifically in that case. Turns out it happened to be the start of what was the events of January 1st.
I see. Was the person actually shot or was just shot at?
No, they were shot.
They were shot. Okay, so someone was actually
Injured
took
as
a
a
bullet.
result of that, yes.
Okay, and the person was at large.
Yes.
Okay, but at what point would you notify the public that a person was shot and the shooter is at large?
I think we need to do the investigation to find out what we don't know, right? And then based off of that information from the detectives that are going out to the scene, the officers that are at the scene, that information would come back. And then at that point, it would go to the homicide detail because it appears to be like an attempted murder is what it may have turned out to be. And based off of that, they would have, it would be under their kuleana, their business to handle that case and then provide that information through our PIO to get that out to the public.
I see. Then at 7:35, there was a HPD notification, road closure, traffic from Honolulu Freeway in the eastbound direction, exit 1A off-ramp is shut down due to police investigation. So at that point, I guess it's still early in the investigation. I guess after that, 7:52, media attention of the incident as a suspicious circumstance is what was reported by HPD. At what point was the public or the media and the public notified that there was someone? And by the way, in my mind, there's a little bit of difference between someone who's say shot at on the highway versus someone shot at a business. I think they're both equally serious, don't get me wrong. But that means the person's on the road.
Correct.
Right? Which
Yes.
is quite scary.
But we have the benefit of 24 hours or, being able to look at this from on the other side of the incident, left of the incident, not right of the incident or as the incident happened. So, I mean, what you're bringing up is all information we now have after the fact, which is playing into our mind and our ability to think through and how we look at things. So I think our perceptions are somewhat different as they are as it's happening and as our officers are going through this information trying to conduct an investigation, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that does make sense. The next thing we have, this is according to the Star Advertiser, there was an interview with the mayor, and the mayor said that he spoke to you about noon, and they were pursuing an armed suspect. But that came from the mayor. It didn't come from the police department. Is that something that's part of the protocol, or it just so happened to?
I think that
play out that
information
way?
came out from Daryl Huff as far as Hawaii News Now at or about the same time as that information.
Okay, and some will say that the Star Advertiser got that from Daryl Huff, but I won't get between them. But I think you may be accurate there. But you're right. So that was. But the point is that it came from the mayor, which is fine if we're going to make that the protocol that the mayor is going to be the spokesman for HPD.
No, that's not the protocol.
Okay. And then apparently the same person drove into Kalihi and then with the use of putting a gun to the woman's head, stole their car, right? But that was reported on Kono and Aho streets as weapons. So the public wasn't, or the media wasn't informed that, well, it was much more serious than simply weapons, right?
So that was classified as the officers on the scene. Had we put two and two together yet, we weren't involved in pursuing this individual at that time. So this happened separately. And it wasn't until the officers realized during the investigation, hey, wait, this might be the same individual. And so that's how that connection is made. But it's a little while after the incident that our officers put two and two together and we started to make the connection.
I see. And at that point, I'm just trying to piece it together in my mind. At that point, we knew the license plate of the car because it's stolen, the make and model.
Correct.
Right? Because it's stolen. Right. Is that how HPD was able to track down the person, because we knew of the stolen car's make and model and license
I think
plate?
we knew the vehicle description, the license plate number, and the direction of flight. I believe we also had our helicopter in the air around this time looking for the individual. And then at that point, once we put two and two together, we knew, okay, this is the suspect. We could see that at that period of time. How much time that is, I don't know exactly. I don't have a timeline with me. But I know somewhere in that time period, there was identification made that the individual is heading in this direction. I believe they came back to town. That individual came back to town, and it was subsequently an hour or so later. I don't know if the helicopter picked it up then or we picked it up at the Kapahulu, where there was another incident involving officers.
And again, that's good police work that you're able to find that suspect vehicle, determine that that's the person. And what was, at that point though, there was a decision made not to stop the vehicle? Or?
No, our officers were looking for the individual and the vehicle. They happened to be at a frequented place where the individual might have been or might go to, and so that's how that event came about in the Kapahulu area.
I see. That's how we found him, the individual, was because he frequented a place that he was known to go to. Again, good police work in finding him. But that was in Kapahulu. Was this must have been after he was on the windward side then?
Yes.
Okay. And he was actively shooting at once the police were able to track him down, find him, he started shooting at you folks?
Well,
at the
all of
police?
that is still under investigation on how exactly it happened.
Yeah.
And so I don't have all those facts memorized or on hand. And so, but there was some identification made, incident evolved. There was shots fired at that incident, and then he fled the area again.
I see. I will say that I did get complaints from, and we may hear from him today, that he lived on the street where the car was hijacked and was unaware that there was someone out there with a gun shooting people and possibly shooting people and holding. At that point, there was no connection between the two, but still, they were concerned that they weren't notified that someone was carjacked on their street. But also someone in Kaimuki who took a bullet to their car, a stray bullet, who may or may not have been off the road had they gotten information that there was an active shooter. At what point did the police department actually let the media know that there was an active shooter and people should stay off the road?
I don't think we made that notification because there's two reasons. Well, so in my mind, I'm looking at it as if I tell everybody what we're looking for, what's going on, yes, that gives people the opportunity to get out of the way, but it also gives other people the opportunity to get in the way. And there are social media posts that people were trying to get involved. If people knew it, they would have taken the person out themselves. These are posts that are on social media sites, which are very disturbing to a law enforcement officer. We don't want the public getting involved at all. And so here is a dilemma we have on providing information, timely and accurate. To what extent do we help, we can ask people not to get involved. If we provide every information we have, that's going to generate some people to get involved and some people to get off the street. So that's kind of the dilemma in my thought processes of that afternoon.
And I agree, it really is a dilemma. Do we let the public know, risking that some members of the public, irresponsible actually members
Right.
of the public, would actually go out and seek this dangerous situation? Or would it help people and allow folks to take necessary precautions like not leaving the house, or if it was in the weekday and school was in session, to lock down the schools even. That is a dilemma. Personally, I tend to side with letting the public know, right? And I'd like to think, and of course you have way more experience with this, that people would actually try to get involved. Um, as it is now, I had my staff pull up and see that social media was going nuts.
Yeah.
They knew somehow that something was going on and they were posting it, probably because there were numerous police cars following the individual. But whether or not we provide accurate and timely information to the media, it's going to happen anyway, it seems,
Right.
based on,
Yeah.
on what just happened. So let's address some of your problem, the HPD's problems, not your problems, with divulging personal information. Don't you think that could easily be resolved by simply not placing the personal information in the media release or in the emails, but rather just the facts of what's going on?
We do that now. We make sure that what we put on the email and or the information going out doesn't contain that personal, the PII or other information.
One of the things in the written testimony, I believe this was someone from the editor, Ed Lynch from the Star Advertiser. It says that, you know, this never was a problem prior to the system being switched over from analog to digital. So how do you justify that? Because it never was a problem. Why is it a problem now?
Well, I think everything's evolving, correct? And what we see with technology today, and the invent or the advent of, you know, criminal activity being either on the internet, trying to get personal information. It wasn't until subsequently later that this bulletin came out from the Department of Justice providing this information. And I think at that time, going into the encryption mode was very expensive. So we had to, you know, gather funding. And of course, I wasn't the chief at the time. But I guess I would assume they came to the council to ask for money to be able to provide this, to conform to the policies, and then go ahead and encrypt the radio systems. But it's something that was evolving over years, going all the way back to 9/11 with the whole interoperability of police and fire and EMS communications in their response to the 9/11 event, and then how can improvements be made to the communication systems. And then this, it wasn't probably 5 or 7, maybe 10 years ago that this whole thing about PII and other information is now being addressed, and that we need to keep that information confidential. So how do we do all of that, right? And radio systems are very expensive for encryption, so I don't know what the exact bill was, but.
Okay. I just want to read from this testimony. To be clear, local journalists never had total access to all emergency communications from Honolulu agencies. In the days when we had scanners, emergency responders had tactical channels that media could not access. Police would use TAC channels to share sensitive information. Is that still a possibility now?
It's a possibility for our specialized units to use specialized channels for that kind of information, but what we're talking about is general patrol operations, which is our communications with our communications officers, what we know as dispatchers. That communication is all in the patrol channels. That's not a separate channel. To have an officer try to remember what channel he's on, especially when things start to get busy and I've got to change to a TAC channel versus staying in the clear on the public access channel, you're asking my officer to do too many things. They have so many things going on already. I'm adding one more to their belt for something to do is way too much. Could we do it over a plethora of years in training? Probably, but right now in something this, to me, it just seems something very difficult to do and to add another layer on top of what we're asking police and our communications officers who have 5 television screens and a multitude of tasking to do within the communications division, and to ask them to go and do that also. This is just adding more challenges.
No, I appreciate that. And in fact, the Deputy Director of Law Enforcement, Jerry Radula, was sure to point that out in his testimony, that could present a whole new can of worms. Okay, members, any follow-up questions? Councilmember Cordero? Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, Chief. Thank you. I know that Chair Waters actually asked a lot of questions, so I'm glad that I'm going after him. But going back to the encryption and the type of technology that you do use, is there, so when it goes to the encryption, what is that timeline and process? How long does that take to go?
The radios are encrypted from the get-go, so it's end-to-end encryption now. So there's no format. Once you turn on the radio, it's actively encrypted.
Okay, got it. And so when it is encrypted, what does the communications end up being if there are personal information that may need to be actively, possibly redacted in between?
It's not on the radio because it's encrypted and we're end-to-end users are certified or authorized. Therefore, we don't have to encrypt that information. I mean, we don't have to redact that information. We can present that information over the radio and get the answers back.
Okay, thank you. And so you mentioned that you and your department are already going to be working on utilizing your own social media and information that's going to be going out to the media as well, such as the press releases. So what information and timeliness are you going to be addressing through those efforts?
So we're looking at it as a 24/7 hour operation so that whatever's happening in the patrol realm out on the streets, that we'll be able to provide timely information, safety alerts, anything else that need to go out to the public, we'll be able to have that information readily available by an officer or individual who's on duty ready to provide that information. So right now we don't have that capability. Right now we run usually Monday through Friday. We do have access to our public affairs and other people on off hours, but generally, and they do a great job at the information they can get out, working with our specialized units and patrol units. But we don't have people 24/7 on social media or to be able to help us get that information out in another way, which is through your cell phones and social media.
Okay, but would the criteria be then to allow for alerts to go out to through your social media or to the media? Is there going to be a threshold on what information you should be pushing out?
I think we still got to work through exactly what information we want to put out. But I think anything that Chair Waters brought up that impacts the public and provides alerts and safety alerts to them is something we should put out on our social media page, as well as use the media to help get that out.
Okay, thank you. I know that because of the different incidents that occurred from IAEA, so I have from IAEA to Kapalama, so the different communications mainly through social media. A lot of our constituents would, screenshot what's occurring on social media. Of course, some not knowing the different connections while the incidents occurred, but I think what Chair Waters' point about makes a lot of these internet keyboard warriors become very deceptive to the rest of the public who are receiving that information or just reading it themselves. So I think allowing, I don't want to say disengaging the misinformation from social media, but really taking advantage of that narrative will help, I guess, the general public and from the rest of our neighborhood watches and neighborhood reporters themselves disseminating information that could be very false. So
No, I think you bring up a great point, Councilmember Cordero, is there are social media posters out there that would provide misinformation, false information. And then there are more, like our own HPD website, social media posts that we could put out, which would be more accurate and positive information on to helpful, not, and then you would have people that would be out there for nefarious reasons trying to do. So you can't believe everything you see or see in a post. However, you would have more trust in those organizations who are out there trying to give the right and accurate information.
Certainly, and this goes to the other agencies too. Just a few weeks or a week before that, of course, there was a big tire fire in part of my district in IAEA as well. And then, through social media, people were screenshotting it, taking photos from IAEA Heights or Halawa Valley or from the Aloha State, even from Aliamanu, AMR side, just taking different angles from my district of a fire. And all the while during that evening, there wasn't any reports on the 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock news at that moment, but looking for different reports where we were able to find a report about another fire in my district in IAEA on HPD's, I think, traffic. I don't know. There was some HPD website that reported that fire on Honolulu Road, but not the one on Kamehameha. So I think not just HPD, but also the different alerts that goes out publicly to be consistent as well is something that absolutely will help. I guess we get contacted because they think that we possibly know everything that happens in all parts of our district with all 130,000 people in our district, but we don't always. So we also rely on the public information from our public safety agencies. So we will do our best, and we do want to support all of our public safety responders and agencies to get all the information and do their job. But I think people reaching out to us actively shows that people do want to be alert, be aware, and do care what's happening. So I just wanted to point that out.
No, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Members, any follow-up questions? Councilmember Kiana, followed by Councilmember Okimoto.
Thank you. I just have two quick questions. You stated earlier that as part of this process that you guys are establishing, that you would need to bring people in to the office. And I'm just kind of wondering why that is. Isn't there some chain of command that when there's an emergency, someone has to keep capacity in the office to get the word out? That's my first question. And second, while I know you guys are going through this process, what happens if this happens tonight or tomorrow without a established process in place? What happens in a situation like that to learn from the lessons of January 1st?
Well, I think by us talking about it over the last week, discussing it internally within the department, we have a greater awareness of what individuals' capabilities are, who has the added expertise to help us in certain areas, whether that's social media, and then we can do a lot of that from home, right? So people don't have to come into the office, depending on what that information is and how to get it out there. But you have to remember, just because if it happens to right now, this minute, the information is not going to come out 2 minutes later. It's not going to come out until we conduct an investigation, have the facts, so we can provide the facts to the public and make that. So that takes time, right? And that time, how that happens, how long that is either in our favor or not, depending on how quickly we need to get out information to the public. But really, is it accurate and timely because we have the facts? What I don't want to do is put out information and then have to come back out 2 minutes later and change what I just told you because I'm rushing to get information out. And so we got to be careful how we do that and how accurate it is, but it still needs to be timely, right? So I think we can do that if it happens anytime until we get the formal process in. But I think right now we have a discussion and agreements with each other on how we're going to do this.
So you have confidence if something were to happen this evening, and that you would have the capacity or be in a better position to get all of the relevant information and disseminate to the public and the news media more quickly.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Councilmember Okimoto.
Thank you, Chair. Aloha, Chief. I wanted to thank, I can empathize with Chair Waters and his wanting to keep his family safe. I think I'm grateful that, he shared that. And I want to thank Councilmember Cordero for bringing up the questions about the social media. I thank you for explaining to us, because I watched the press conference that was released at the time of, or right after the event, and I can only imagine how you said it was very fluid. And I'm not a trained professional, that's what you guys do. But I guess from my perspective, and I had to talk to you about this, how can we find the balance of making sure that the information is, that the necessary information gets out there, not too little and not too much, so that our communities are feeling safe. But I also understand that social media is a blessing and a curse at the same time. What can we do? I always try to ask, what can I do to take back to my community and talk to the people about, we're not trying to make your jobs harder, because that's not, and sometimes inadvertently the public can do that with the best intentions, but unfortunately trying to get out there and, take it on video or get information out. Sometimes, like Councilmember Cordero says, we can get misinformation out. But what can we do to educate our communities, knowing that you guys have a job to do, knowing that every situation is fluid? I think that's a great question that Vice Chair Kia'aina asked, if you guys would be ready. And I would assume that you would hope, but every situation is so different that you do the best that you can, and maybe you can explain. But I want to know what I can take back to my community to educate them as best as possible in working with you guys and helping you, instead of possibly getting in the way and making situations worse.
No, I think you're spot on. I think the answers to Chair Waters' questions as he went through the timeline briefly is understanding what law enforcement is doing, what we need to find out, that information we need to find out. You might want it in a timely manner. You might desire the need to get that information out as quickly as possible. But again, we got to be accurate and we got to present the facts. We can't make assumptions and based off of just rumors or other things. We got to make sure we know what we're saying when we go out and say it, right? So that's the first thing. So what the information you're going to get from Honolulu Police Department is going to be timely and accurate. Number two is that the information that you might read on social media is not always true. So, if you need to validate that from another source, then please, advise your constituents to do that. As well as, we are prepared. I think, right, we're still working through the formal process of institutionalizing what I've said earlier, but you have my commitment that we are working on it. I think, as I mentioned, we're absolutely ready to do this today. We just got to formalize it in writing so it's within the policies and make sure it's within all our policies. And that's part of this process of reviewing what we've done, what happened, what we did right, what we can do better, and then how do we take that back and maybe alter policies, change policies to make it better for the entire department and for the public safety as well.
Thank you, Chief. And, I know Chair Waters mentioned the importance, like he would have had his family shelter in place. And I think the right-minded thinking person would do that, but we know that there are some people who, if they had the information, unfortunately, they may go out there and chase you guys or pursue the situation or pursue whatever you guys are doing. So what would be the advice for, I think people like us would think, yes, we're going to stay in place, we're not going to get out there, but that's not the case for everybody, especially those who are constantly, following social media. So what kind of advice could you give, a PSA to the communities about what we should and shouldn't be doing when there is something like this happening, with or without the media?
Well, I think it's best to be away from the situation. Let law enforcement, who are the professionals, as you stated earlier, in handling these types of incidents, let us do our job. Everyone else, please stay clear of the police operation so that we can do what we're doing.
Thank you. And I had one more question. You mentioned, and I want to thank, we have you from the police department, our chief, and we have the director of EMS, and we also have our fire chief here. And I know that you guys work together. So I was just curious, when you guys are running out there, and in this case, you did need extra assistance, is there communication between your department and their departments, because you guys are working together? If you needed an ambulance there, if you needed first responders there,
Absolutely.
is there a communication? Like, do they know what's going on moment by moment at the same time that's happening with you guys, with the dispatch? I don't know how the communication works.
So in the communications division at the Joint Traffic Management Center for the city, you have the Honolulu Police Department's communications division, then you have fire, and then you have EMS dispatchers as well. So they're all co-located on the same floor. They're not right next to each other, but they're very close to each other. And so they can have discussions back and forth, either verbally or via the computer. But generally speaking, when a call comes in, the first question you're asked when you call 911 is police, fire, EMS, right, or ambulance, right? And based off of that, sometimes they're joint calls. So all three of us are going, maybe just two of us are going, or maybe just one of us is going, depending on how that call is routed and what information is asked. So based off of that, there's a response. So when we all get to the scene, we're all working together, coordinating to make sure we all have our own specific roles and responsibilities, and everybody's doing that.
But in the case of this, where it was an active shooter, because if a call comes in, it's after somebody, I guess, is injured, but were you guys pursuing the active shooter, they don't know where you're going either then, or do they know?
No, they may know. There is no conversation between chiefs and I having that conversation as far as where they're going and what they're doing, unless they were informed by their dispatch personnel who are in the same room with our dispatch personnel.
I see. Okay. Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I mean, I absolutely agree that the advice to folks is to go home, be safe, get off the road, get off the street. But if the public doesn't have that information, then they can't act on it.
Right.
And the fact of the matter is, in this situation, social media was the one reporting, because they were filming it, they were posting it, and as Councilmember Cordero said, oftentimes it can be inaccurate and actually more dangerous. Before I open it up for more questions, I know we still have Chief Ha'o and Director Ireland and Deputy Director Radula, but fact of the matter is, I mean, we, the public, ask police to do so much, right? And we're so thankful that every time asked to do things, you do it. But really, your main duty is to fight crime. And that's what we want you to do. If you have to worry about having enough personnel to make sure that information gets out there in a timely basis and it's accurate and helpful, and you got to redact this or redact that, that's asking you to do too much. Versus if we have the media, they get access to it, and they alone, right, under limited circumstances, with a contract saying you can and cannot disseminate certain things, just like what the Las Vegas Police Department did. They had a agreement to use encrypted police scanners and a straightforward contract that protects both the public's right to be informed and the police need to keep certain channels private. That way they get the word out, and basically it's what you agree with them on and what should be disseminated and not. That way you're free from having to worry about this stuff, And then if it doesn't work, we revoke the key. Just a thought. But any follow-up questions, members, before we move on to the next testifier? And I'll give you an opportunity to come and speak again, Chief, if you want to, when we make the announcement about the amended committee draft. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Next, Chief. Thank you, Chief. Next, we have Honolulu Fire Department Chief Howell. Aloha, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Hello, good afternoon, Chair Waters, Vice Chair Kiaina, council members. Thank you for this opportunity for us to come and speak on this issue. I'm Fire Chief Kalani Ha of the Honolulu Fire Department. I don't want to go over the same concerns that we have, just as Chief stated. We have our own concerns about the type of information, personal information, or possibly the information that may negatively impact our operations and possibly the safety and well-being of our personnel. But I do agree and fully support the timely and accurate information that we can provide to the public. As a member of the public myself, I would want information that I can take and use to keep myself and my family safe. But as a fire chief and in my position, I also have concerns again on how this information is being disseminated and what information and how this information can be used against all first responders. Chief mentioned in 9/11, terrorist events. We're all trained that there's secondary devices that may target first responders. So sometimes having this information so readily available that's out there to the public, radio communications, it can be actually used against us. So that's a concern from my perspective. The fire department, we are nowhere near complex as the information and issues that the police department and even EMS, but again, it's also a concern for us. So basically what we're here today to address is, what is that balance of information that you said? What would be acceptable for the first responder agencies, and how this information, what information is being given, and from a public's perspective, enough information, again, that they can do what they can do to keep themselves safe. Currently, we all have our unique systems in how we give information out for everyday alarms. The HFD, we have a text system that is real time, and we have a list of incident types that's not your little medicals or small nature alarms. It's those higher thresholds that we do post on text messaging to all of the media outlets. They have access on their cell phone, which goes onto our website to share information. But however, there are incidents that will require additional information to bring awareness or require action on the community to take action to keep themselves safe. So what we've learned from Lahaina and the questions that has come from Lahaina is, how can we leverage that additional, a system to provide additional information. And as Chief stated earlier, we were in this, or are currently in discussion with the Department of Emergency Management. We had a Public Safety Committee hearing back in September, and Director Toya did come in and explain the emergency alert system, the wireless, and how we could leverage that system to go above and beyond what we all currently have, to go out and actually send out these bits of information to everyone's cell phones if we deem it's necessary, the ticker tapes across on the TVs. And Director Toya and his staff already have pre-scripted templates of messaging for all natural disasters, but they have time to execute that. And I think that's what we're all trying to work on. I know when we have a wildfire group for the city, and we're working on templates to be able to create evacuations or for various incident types. So we already have a pre-scripted template that we can utilize and just change a little bit of information and add to then get this ready to send out. And we already understand the process. So if we had to initiate the next level of communication, I understand the process and how it works, how our fire dispatch would reach out to the Department of Emergency Management, and how long it would take to utilize any one of those emergency alert systems, and how long it would take. So per Director Toya, they have access and can put things out. It may not be immediate like our everyday systems that we have, but they can get it out within minutes. And it's just being able to exercise and understand the process and who we need to contact to get that information out as soon as possible.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Quick question though, say just as an example, there's a 3-alarm fire on Alawai Boulevard. Who then utilizes that text system and notifying the media from your department? And how soon does that?
Ours is real
Transmitted.
time. So as soon as our units are dispatched, every media outlet, I feel it's better than giving them a radio, because right now everyone has a cell phone. So basically, they give us the people that they want on this log or this list to get these alerts, and they get it real time. So if it's a structure fire, maybe a wildland fire, auto accident, a rescue, these types of alarms is automated in the system, and we wrote code that it goes immediately to the text real time.
So it comes from the dispatcher, or is there a battalion chief, or who actually does
It's
it?
automated.
It's automated.
Yes.
Oh,
Yeah, our system is automated, and our IT division created computer program to again look for these types of incidents. And it's just logic. If this, then send it out. So
but at some point, so you get the call,
right.
right? There's a fire. Somebody has to input that into the system for it to be automated.
That's part of the call taking process, as Chief stated. You call 911, police, fire, or EMS.
I see.
If it's a fire or a nature that belongs in our lane of responsibility, it would spawn to our dispatchers, and they would go ahead, take the information from the caller, the necessary information, location, nature of alarm, and then we would respond as quickly as possible. As soon as they hit the commit button, that information is already sent.
I guess okay, that makes sense. But I guess the difference is the nature of the alarm, right? Which might be more sensitive for the police.
Correct.
Might be. I'm not saying it is or it isn't, but okay. Thank you so much. Members, any questions for Chief Howell? Seeing none, thank you, Chief.
You're welcome.
Appreciate you being here. Next, we have James Ireland, followed by, where's my list? Jared Radula. Hello, welcome.
Aloha, Chair. Thank you, members. James Ireland, Emergency Services Department. A lot has been said today, and we're a little unique in EMS because we do provide health care and we bill for that health care. So we are considered a covered entity under HIPAA. And this is a tongue twister, so I always have to look. It's Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. And that protects people's health information. That includes things like diagnosis, but it also includes things like demographics. And so we have to protect our patients under federal law for information. And in the past, when we had unencrypted radios, anybody with a Radio Shack scanner could listen actually to the conversation with the physician. And all information is protected, and while some people may not think it's a big deal to talk about somebody's hypertension, there are other issues like infectious diseases or other congenital things that would be very, very sensitive, but it's all protected. So we're operating under the backdrop of the need for patient protection. We do have a system now. Our dispatch is tied to a free app called Pulse Point. And the purpose of Pulse Point is to actually let the community know there's a cardiac arrest in the area if you want to go help. So if there were a cardiac arrest right here on the street, it would alert everybody in this room who subscribes to Pulse Point. It's free. Cardiac arrest needed, steps of Honolulu Hale. And in the new version, which we're going to be acquiring, it even tells where the nearest AED is. And so our dispatch, that's all tied together, and then we can go help the person. That's for the life-saving role of Pulse Point. But actually, Pulse Point lets the public know in real time, or anybody who subscribes, every single one of our medical calls. And it classifies it in one of three categories: medical emergency, which is the vast majority, traffic accident, or water rescue, and that would be our ocean safety teams. The traffic accident, it usually gives an intersection, but for the medical emergency, it gives street only. Because we consider the actual house number, demographics, which would be too much information. We have had in the past, when people could get access to that information, actual imposters who would show up at the call even before us, not necessarily in this one case to do harm, but just to offer help. Can I help you before EMS gets here? But it wasn't necessarily a trained provider. So we are concerned about that. Also, if people know where we're responding to, then they could go to the house after when we've taken the patient away and nobody's home. So there are some other security concerns, but our overriding concern is with protected healthcare information. But we do have the Pulse Point app. The other thing we do is we notify the media via a form in what we would consider higher profile events. So for instance, the car accident yesterday on Keamoku, I think that was in the newspaper, the car flipped. Our district chief will respond with our ambulances and manage the scene, so they can't put out the press release right away because they're taking care of patients and managing the scene. But once the kind of scene is resolved and the patients are on their way to the hospital, that district chief will submit a media form. We also have one communications professional, Shane Enright, who's our PIO in our department. She also sometimes will release the media release for events that are considered high profile. And that could be a car crash, e-bike accident, clearly a shooting, some rescues, multiple patient incidents. So with respect to New Year's Day, our district chief or Shane, I think one of them had their media release out that there was a shooting in IAEA, and I think they gave the approximate location within about 45 minutes of the incident. And it was brought up at a press conference we had on New Year's Day injuries at about 11 o'clock, and we discussed it further. So from the medical side, that there was a victim of a shooting, we had that out within about 45 minutes of the event. We generally will put out media releases for all shootings unless they're self-inflicted. And that we've tended to keep private for the families and not publicize those. But if it's definitely an assault or a public shooting or happenings that's a homicide or assault, we will put those out.
Thank you. You said there, in this case on New Year's Day, you did notify the public that there was a shooting approximately 45 minutes after it happened, after an ambulance went to the scene?
If I remember right, the shooting was about 7 in the morning, and I think our PIO, Shane, was notified of it about by 7:30, and it was out within 15 minutes. So I think about 7:45 it got put out.
Okay, and it was reported that it was a shooting?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Any follow-up questions, members? Councilmember Say.
So, Dr. Island, the reporting of the shooting was reported by HPD.
Well, we generally report things independent of the other two agencies, although sometimes our media, Shane, will collaborate with their media teams as well, and we'll put stuff out together sometimes. But it's my understanding that morning, January 1st, we put out a media advisory at about 7:45 independently of the other entities, even though I believe the fire department and the police department were at the scene as well.
No, because at that point in time, there's a criminal act that occurred. And wouldn't the HPD be first in priority to go and do the investigation before that particular media release was done?
Right. Our role is to take care of the patient, whether there's one or more, get them to the hospital, and then that's the end of our role at the scene. The fire department has different roles and responsibilities at emergency scenes as do the police.
So all three of you, the departments have different levels of how to report these incidents? Because if there was a shooting in Pololo housing, I would have thought that HPD would be the first to arrive.
Well, generally, the police are the first to arrive for violent crimes because they have to secure the scene and make sure it's
Right.
safe for everybody else to get there.
But in this particular case, the 731, it was not a crime.
I'm not sure who was the first to arrive there, but we have our process for releasing medical information after events, and we just kind of did our standard for that morning.
I'm just trying to figure out, how did Shane Enright get the report of a shooting, the source? Because that's the discussion we're having as far as this particular resolution.
And sometimes she has to talk to the crews on scene to find out the details, and then that, of course, means they've already had to go to the hospital, or she talks to the district chief on scene. So there is a little delay. There's, if someone tries to call us as something is happening live, usually everybody's focused on the patient, and so there's always going to be a 15 to 45-minute lag.
I'm not questioning that 15 to 45-minute lag. My point is the source of where the source came from for Shane Enright to make that report. Is it on behalf of the HPD who is continuing the investigation?
It was our own paramedics.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's another issue.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's reasonable that the ambulance driver or paramedic would know that the person had a bullet in their body and is reporting a shot. But I guess it comes down to whether or not it should be reported before HPD? Is that what you're concerned?
I believe so, because at that point in time, who is the owner of the gun that used that, gun to shoot the person? Is he on the run or she on the run? I don't know. But my point to you, where's the protocol as far as these three major agencies?
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Chief Logan, maybe you could respond to my question. I don't know. I just wanted to get the idea about the source. If the source is HPD, great.
Well, the question I think you're alluding to is what information exactly did the ambulance or EMS put out? Was it a shooting as if someone ran away? They wouldn't know that necessarily. They would know that a victim in a car is shot.
Okay.
Did they shoot themselves or were they shot by a suspect? They wouldn't know that, and I don't think they broadcasted all of that information because that's the police department's role to investigate, not the EMS's Kuleana to broadcast, we have an active shooter running around. That I don't think that's what they published, to the best of my knowledge.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions for Dr. Ireland? Councilmember Cordero.
Thank you, Chair. Dr. Ireland, I think I just want to reiterate the question that I had with Chief relating to, the type of information that's shared, if it's at least consistent. I know things as mentioned by Chief and then Councilmember Okimoto, how situations are fluid, but I guess the information that's initially set out, if there's a way to have a system that can release the same type of statements, whether it be a one-line statement that you release, come out from all agencies, which is, I think, what we were alluding to. And I know that you're using a different system. I know Fire has their own, and then, of course, the new encrypted system with HBD. So I don't know if there's like one main database or dispatch that can release that.
I mean, I think from my department, we always are looking for ways that we can improve in patient care, improve in delivery, improve in communication. So I'd be willing to look at anything with anybody else, how we can do better.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Just one follow-up question. So when you said the notification went out that there was a shooting, or that you're responding and helping someone who was shot, however you want to phrase it, who did that notification go out to?
So I believe our EMS, Shane, has developed a list of people who are interested in receiving that notification, and it's generally press agencies. And it just goes, she fills out a form, it gets pushed out, and everybody on that list gets notified.
I see. Okay, thank you. Any follow-up questions, members? Seeing none, thank you so much. Next, we have Jared Radula, followed by Brian Mick, and then Daryl Huff. Hello, welcome. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. My name is Jared Radula. I'm the Deputy Director of the new State Department of Law Enforcement. Just 2 points in our testimony, offering comments. First, we very much share the concern that the police department has over protecting people's personal information. We recognize that in the modern era, where this may not have been an issue before, it is something that we have to think about, simply because how easy it is for someone to just take someone's identity and then use it for nefarious purposes. We realize that encryption reduces that concern, and this is also a reason why, as the department moves forward, we are looking at encrypting our radio system. But second, we thought about this and we said, well, what kind of things can we do now? And arguably, some jurisdictions look at this situation and might say, hey, why not just leave one channel non-encrypted and then encrypt the others, as was previously spoken about. And the only thing with that is, I have a radio and it has encryption in it. If I want to turn it off or turn to a different channel, I have to hit a series of buttons and keys on that radio in correct sequence to be able to do that. In a normal, non-stressful, routine situation, that might be easy. But in an emergency where I might be fighting with someone or having to deal with something else in an emergency like that, that's a big ask for us to do. And so as a new department, we are looking at this situation very carefully because we want to learn from it. And again, we just wanted to come this afternoon to offer those comments.
Thank you. No, and I appreciate that. And ultimately, that's what the resolution asks everyone to do, to look at it. There is definitely a dilemma here. But the fact that you all are saying that you're willing to look at it, work on it, is a step in the right direction. So appreciate that. But I do have a question. So back when the radios were all analog, arguably it's been 50 years. And then only recently, maybe 3 years ago, it was switched over to digital, and and the media no longer had access to this information. Did law enforcement experience problems with the media posting HIPAA information or personal information, as you mentioned, that we should be concerned about?
So I'm not aware of specific situations where the media has misused information like that. However, what I do know is that in my normal daily work, we see often where people's identities have been stolen. And so this is why, 15 years ago, it was not as frequent, nor was it as easy. My own mother's identity was stolen. So, more recently. So this is the kind of thing that we are more aware of now. And that's why, we need to be more careful about, as government, and be more responsible about, airing people's information out in the open. I mean, monitoring a radio like that is tantamount to standing next to someone and just simply talking about someone's personal information like that, their dates of birth, their social security numbers, where they live. So because of the era in which we live, we just have to be more responsible with that.
Appreciate that very much. Thank you. Members, any questions for the Mr. Ardula? Okay, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Next, I actually have to say, we're now turning to in-person testimony. We have Brian Mick and Daryl Huff who've signed up to testify. Hello, Mr. Mick. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you for your patience.
Hi, good afternoon, Chair Waters and committee members. Thank you for scheduling this resolution for a hearing, and thank you to all the agencies that are here today. My name is Brian Mick. I am here in my personal capacity today. I am in support of the resolution, and I just would like to summarize my written testimony. Two incidents I'd like to highlight. About 6 months ago, there was a gunman who barricaded himself in an apartment on Kapahulu Avenue and had an 8-hour standoff with the police. My son's daycare / preschool is pretty close to that building, and the road in front of it, in fact, was shut down to vehicles. The school was not informed what was going on, to say nothing of locking it down or asking the school to inform the parents what was going on and giving us the option to come pick up our children. So after work ended, Google Maps had me use the back roads to get to the school since Kapahulu Avenue was shut, and I was only informed upon getting there what was going on. So at that point, I grabbed my son and quickly drove away in the opposite direction. Afterwards, I sent a letter to the council, the mayor, and the police department asking what the policy is for informing area schools when there is a situation with an armed gunman. Although HPD did follow up with a phone call, I'm still not clear if there is a policy or what it is. At that point, though, they did point out that the news media was reporting on what was going on pretty close to in real time, and that we should have been aware. I don't really agree with that statement, but it just made the New Year's Day incident all that more perplexing to me, since the opposite seemed to happen, where the news media was not informed. As coincidence would have it, the carjacking occurred right in front of our apartment. Luckily, we weren't home. We were at a New Year's Day gathering in Po'oa, but had we come home 30 minutes earlier, we would have gone through that intersection, and it might have been us that had the gun pointed at us. Had we received some sort of alert to stay off the roads, we simply would have stayed at the family gathering longer. And I do think the vast majority of citizens would have heeded a warning to stay off the roads for a while. And it could have been general enough to not really induce anyone who might have wanted to rush towards the scene, in my opinion. Now, I do hear some of the concerns that are raised today and understand that maybe the access to the radio dispatch isn't the best solution, and that officer safety and protecting people's information is very, very important. However, I think that the current operating practice is unacceptable, so I'm glad to hear that everybody's open to trying to adjust it. If the agencies need additional position and funds to implement some sort of new process, I hope that they include it in their upcoming budget requests, and I hope council will take a serious look at funding them. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, any questions for Mr. Mick? Seeing none, appreciate you coming out and testifying today, and your story is very persuasive as well. And again, thank goodness, thank God, your family wasn't in harm's way.
Thank you, and I agree with a lot of your sentiments expressed today, too.
Thank you. Next, we have Daryl Huff. Thank you for being here as well. Welcome.
Hello, members. It's nice to be here. I'm frankly quite nervous. You know, I'm not going to read my testimony. I think I would like to refer you to Ed Lynch's testimony, particularly the part about what we're actually talking about here, which is an agreement between professional organizations, our professional news organizations, and professional law enforcement organizations, where they would basically sell us the same equipment that they have for receiving only. They would program the radios to what we can hear. We would have agreements that said we can't use this or this or this or this. And if we broke any of those agreements, we'd lose the radios. So no cost to taxpayers, real-time information to the media. And we actually, when you come to thinking about social media and information transferring on social media, at Hawaii News Now, for example, we have a larger social media footprint than any law enforcement agency in the state. So when information comes into our station and we disseminate it very carefully, it goes out to a very large footprint of people. Now, I say that because on the day of the 1st, I was the senior newsroom person in our newsroom. I don't know why I chose to work that holiday, but I did. I hope I can go on a little bit longer, and I would love to answer some of the, what I can see, far-fetched hypotheticals that have been thrown out in opposition to this idea. Anyway, the shooting at Halava we knew about from EMS. Thank you. We knew within an hour or so, maybe less, who the suspect was, how dangerous he was, and that this was a very serious situation. And so, but we were constrained by our professionalism and our standards not to start spitting stuff out. But there was social media going crazy. So we felt compelled, and one of my jobs that day was working with our folks in the newsroom saying, what do we know that's good? What do we know that's bad? What can we verify? What have we heard from HPD? And as you know, from HPD, we heard nothing. So, and I personally ended up put in some jeopardy that day because I went to the scene of that shooting with a cameraman. When we got to Kalihi Street on our way back, 2 police vehicles zoomed by. So we legally followed them up Kalihi Street, lost track of them, twisted back around. I come back Kalihi and King Street, and there are a phalanx of police officers with their long guns out. The rifles were all out. And I'm like, what the heck is this? And so I came out, I kind of hid behind a utility thing. People were all around, Kalihi Housing was right there, and we still knew nothing about the fact that that gunman had fired a number of shots at that location and just a few minutes before fired shots at another location, all of which we would have known had we heard the scanners. I also want to point out really quickly that if you really want an example of where scanners could save lives, think about Maui. Think about Maui. Think about the videos that we saw of those police officers running door to door to door, communicating. The fire has jumped the bypass. The fire is on this street. The fire is on that street. This street is closed. Now, I don't know whether any media organization would have been good enough, frankly, to keep up with all those scanner calls. But we all know that nothing was coming out of Maui County or EMS, and that we, as a news organization, hearing that, could have saved lives with that information. There's no question about it. Of all the questions of who could save lives, information could have saved lives that day. So I want to put us in context here that this situation of having lost the scanners a few years ago is already jeopardizing public safety. Everyone seems to have seen the examples of that, okay? So now where do we go from here, okay? Again, a very carefully crafted, technologically clean guidelines, laws, if we have to, although I don't think it's necessary, to have an agreement. And again, I've been in this business, in this town, for over 40 years. I've worked in every single newsroom, other than the Star Bulletin, and I've listened to scanners my whole career. 90% of the time, what we get from the scanners is a traffic accident. So we can tell people there's a traffic accident. Before DOT, before HPD, that's 90% of it. Personal information that's such a red herring is just not true. It is not a risk. Nobody's putting social security numbers. Yeah, we get an address. Yeah, we might get mail, age X. The only time I have ever heard in 40 years protected personal information going out over a scanner, it was for either an APB on a dangerous suspect that they were looking for across the island, or two, a missing child. Those are the two examples that I've ever heard. So this idea that we're going to be having people's IDs stolen because the news media organizations are getting information. Another example, we spend a lot of time in hospitals, EMS, we've traveled with ambulance. Thanks, Jim. We see stuff all the time we don't report, and we have agreements. We don't report it. Social media misinformation. Again, the other day when the poor lady was shot by her ex-husband at Ala Moana, you know what the police put out first? Active shooter, Pearl Ridge. We went nuts. Everybody went nuts. Social media went nuts. It wasn't true. It was a domestic shooting. The guy had fled. It was a situation that was largely under control. We would have known that, and we would have put it out. We're very careful about what we put out. Let me sum up. I think I've covered everything, but if there's any questions, I know one of the problems with the media is we're not transparent either. We're not transparent about what happens in our newsrooms, so I'd be happy to answer any questions you folks have about how we handle this stuff that we hear on the scanners. Like I said, we're all highly trained to be very careful about that. We are also highly attentive to our instructions in the field from the police. We are all trained not to mess up a situation. If they've got a hostage situation or a standoff going on, we're not gonna tell the guy where the police are hiding. We don't put up a drone. We don't do the stuff we could do because we want to protect the police operation. Our credo is we do no harm. And we're not going to take any information off of those scanners that harms anybody if we can avoid it. One other rule we had from the scanners, and I believe this was an FCC rule when the scanners were basically broadcast, is we can't use information directly from the scanners. We have to verify it separately. We might say, police are responding to an incident at X street, which may be this. But we were restricted by what we could say and what we couldn't say. And sometimes we would play games with the other stations by putting on our radios a false call that we were responding to something like a plane crash. And then we watch them pull up and we know that they're breaking the rules because they're listening to our radios. But that's all inside baseball. I've said enough, and I hope that I can answer any questions you have, particularly with some of the scenarios that have been put out, I just think are very far-fetched and unlikely and a very small piece of the pie here. So I'd be open to any questions you have.
I appreciate that very much. Councilmember Cordero.
Thank you. So of course we heard that the different agencies have different radios or dispatching information to the media. And with that, we know that EMS provided information about someone who was shot by exit 1A.
Yes.
And is it difficult for the media to have to, I guess, determine which, I guess, radio or format you're going to be receiving that information? Or do you just receive it all as like an email or a text?
All three use an email alert system. The two that are very good are the fire department and the ambulance program. Jim Ireland was entirely correct. The first time we knew officially that there had been a shooting was from them. Fire will often put the traffic accidents on. They have this code that I still don't understand. It's our angle rescue, da, da, da. It's kind of a funny code that you have to discern, and I'm not on the assignment desk anymore, so I really don't know what that means myself, but other people do. So those two are good. The police department puts out an email that has an attached Excel spreadsheet. So in order to even read it, you've got to click on it, open it, and it doesn't have a headline on it. So you have to open every one of those, open the Excel spreadsheet and see it. There have been days when there was literally nothing put on that sheet. Not all day. And so, you know, it's just not, the one thing I wanted to throw out is that I don't want to blame the chief for this or anything. It's a culture. And when you have a gatekeeper between the information going out in real time and the media, that you're interjecting the culture of what we trust the media with. And if you don't trust the media, you're not going to put out enough to help them out. And, you know, I really feel like this case on the first was really a failure of the whole culture. You know, and so I wish we could improve the culture. I try and talk to officers and executives of the departments and say, look, please see us as partners with you in the community, not as adversaries. I'm making a really long answer to your question. I apologize, but yeah, there are ways probably to make this better immediately with better information. Right now, the police department's infrastructure just does not exist for that. And the interpretation they make of what they send us, like aggravated assault, the call that might have alerted me to the fact that there were gunshots in Kalihi just said weapons case and an address with no relationship to the suspect, even though we knew from the circumstances that's partly what it was. We put out word when we realized that the suspect was in Kaneohe, we put out a push on that, you know, on your app. And we were the ones trying to get people informed on the app. So I think, again, overcoming social media, if people have a place they trust, it's probably more likely to be the media.
Okay, thank you. I just was wondering about like the different forms of receiving the information so that you're able to timely get out the information. Just as when an incident happens, there is, I don't want to say lag, but like you need time to receive the information, determine like what can go out, and then from us as agencies, then it goes out, right?
Right. There's interpretations being made by each agency. I think that the fire department is really almost automatic. I don't think that there's any person there saying yes or no. EMS, I think, has a person that says yes or no, but it's not a person there's always a person there doing that. HPD, I'm not sure what their operation is.
Okay, thank you. And then also, I think being able to accurately describe what's happening at the situation, also my district, Pro Ridge, you know, with the information that did get out to the media and then quickly dispersed with my neighborhood watches again and neighbors in the area. Of course, people just trying to be on alert and like staying away. So that does help a lot. I've seen that played out with the media pushing those push alerts. You know, I just get screenshots from residents and I get like 100 of the same screenshots, right? And so when it is an inaccurate type of, and you do have to update. Of course, you update when you get more information. So I guess even though we are getting updates, is that really a huge issue when HVD says it's an active shooter versus like another type of description?
Are you talking about our updates? Our pushes?
Yeah, correct.
Our pushes are usually sort of a amalgam of information. For example, the day of the chase, we were getting information from law enforcement sources that we can't identify. I don't know why the chief said the mayor told me something, but we were getting information from all kinds of sources.
Oh, okay.
On those days, those pushes had virtually nothing to do with what HPD had given us. It was all from confirmable information, sometimes from social media, sometimes from just looking at the pictures, from calls we were getting, and then we would check back with our law enforcement sources to see if that was correct.
Okay. And then let's say for a fire, for example, I know that, so my staff would send videos to me of the news reports, and then they'll say, okay, they said it was this thing, and then, oh, they clarified that it's now this type of information. Of course, you get that information pretty quick from fire, but when there are corrections with HPD reporting, sometimes we see that there's no further follow-up or update. Does that mean that it's not gonna be corrected, or if, like, what was actually put out is factual?
I'm not sure I quite understand your question.
Okay,
Try to-
let's say we find out something during an incident, and then we find updates on the reports, like the story will be updated when more
Oh,
information
in the
comes
news you're talking about?
Yes, correct.
Okay.
And then so later down the line, normally when I'm at my neighborhood board, we find out further clarification from the
Was
agencies.
it completely wrong?
Sometimes,
Yeah,
yeah.
sometimes. I mean, I know what you're saying. I think that, again, we're getting back to how we get information. With a fire, for example, we would have heard the initial call, which probably would have come off as a tire fire. And so we're going, yeah, it's a tire fire, you know, but then people see this great column of smoke. So we need to explain why there's that column of smoke. We might do that at 10 in the morning and then 11 in the morning. It's on our social media, it's on our webpage. Whether we go back to the newscast and do a story about that smoke and fire when it really didn't harm anyone,
Okay.
you know, then, it's just, those are kind of judgments we make all day long.
Okay, that's good to know. The reason why I asked that question, and I was going to relate it back to the resolution where how, if there's no follow-up and then it was possibly or not fully updated with factual information afterwards, when will the media determine going back to the agencies to figure that out?
Okay, so that's totally on us. You know, it's our job to get it right, and it's our job to go back to the agencies and get real confirmation. So we would, if we put a story on the air at 5 o'clock, say, that should be by then confirmed by official sources with official information.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any questions, members? Councilmember Say.
Yeah, Mr. Huff, are there any municipalities that have your thoughts as far as these type of agreements between
Las Vegas.
just strictly Las Vegas?
That's the one that we know about. Many other departments have much more active ways of getting real-time information. I understand, I was hoping Lynn Kawano would be on with us today. She spent time in Dallas, Kansas City, Dallas. Their police department has a real-time dispatch ticker that they put on their social media for all the public. And it has a lot of information on it, even some stuff I wouldn't think they would put out. So there's ways, and so when we talk about these different ways, you know, that's something to discuss about, you know, because if HPD had a regular ticker, and Michelle Yu from HPD was showing me on their social media, they do have sort of a ticker, but it's very vague and not very helpful. So, I mean, but beefing that up might be a short-term answer, but ultimately, in the end, when you're in breaking situation, when you've got fires, plane crashes, shootings, crazed people driving across the highway, real-time information, you can trust us with it. You can trust us with it. You know, you have trusted us with it for decades and decades and decades. And I really believe that trust is something that's so precious to us that we wouldn't mess it up just because we went back to the way we were 5 years ago.
I'm just chuckling, Chair. You know, in today's world, the communications that we have, I think the general public is mistrustful. with all the different channels that we have, having their particular point of views conveyed to the general public and persuading them one way or the other, for me, it is a concern. But in the case of public safety with HPD, have we addressed this particular issue maybe with the Office of Information Practice? That they could be that third party to assist us in seeing what the resolution chair wants to address. You know, on-time information, they could do the research at the state level. Something to consider, because they have that Office of Information Practice, which delves into what can be disclosed and what cannot be disclosed. But that's what I just thought about it, Daryl. This is the only other concern, the downside of what's happening nationally, internationally.
We're all at a loss to what to do about that.
Thank you. Just as a follow-up, I think you made it very clear both verbally and in writing that information sent via email and, well, the information sent via email has been slow, vague, encoded, and inaccurate, and often withheld altogether. You also, I think, addressed the consideration about personal information. But let me ask you this. It's been brought up, and rightfully so, the concern about the good guy with a gun who's going to get this information and try to help, which actually won't help at all. And by the way, maybe I should be clear. What I'm not asking the first responders to do is to disseminate this information to the public in general. We're talking about to the media, and then let the media disseminate this. Or if we can find a happy medium like the ticker situation that you're talking about, that may work. But can you address the situation about the good guy with the gun, or the fact that this information may draw people to the dangerous situation?
Yeah, sure. I think the first thing to remember is that we're not social media. We're not going to throw stuff out willy-nilly without, providing we get the information, we're not going to throw it out there in such a way that the public doesn't get a sense of what the risk is. Whether we can stop some guy who thinks he can drive out in the middle of, Kaikili Highway and draw down on a guy who's driving at him with an AR-15, I can't control that person. But again, we're not having real-time information going from us to the public. We're having real-time information come to us, be discerned and analyzed, and then going out to our audience. That's the important distinction, is that instead of the agency becoming the gatekeeper, we become the gatekeeper for that information to our audience. And I can't control what everybody does with that information. I think the vast majority of people, one, they want to obey the law, and two, they want to stay safe.
Okay, appreciate that very much. Also, your point is that you could have an agreement with the first responder agencies that can be withdrawn if violated, if you violate any of the terms and conditions of the agreement, right?
Yeah, and again, I'm speaking for myself here. Maybe I haven't made that clear. I'm not speaking for Hawaii News Now. I'm not speaking for the rest of the media. I'm speaking as we operate. And I know in the discussions, and I think I was in management at the time that the radios became encrypted, and we began having conversations about what it would take to get back some access. I mean, this is going on for years now. And we were always willing to have a reasonable limitation on our access. For example, the tactical channels. We don't get the tactical channels now. We don't hear what SWAT's doing. We don't hear, maybe the back channel that EMS uses. For example, we used to hear the actual paramedic in the field calling into the hospital and saying, I've got a 35-year-old woman here, she's been injured in this way, her blood pressure is this, her pulse is this, she's bleeding from this. And I don't need to hear that. We don't need to hear that. But under the old scenario, that was one channel that we did hear, and we routinely ignored the information unless it just generally told us, oh, that's a person that's going to die. You know, that's a newsworthy story happening. So we will head in that direction, but we're not going to report that this person has died or Jane Doe has died. We have very strict rules about when we name victims. We don't name victims at all under our standard, you know, unless it becomes public in some way through a judicial process. And we don't name people who have died unless we either hear directly from their immediate family or from the official medical examiner or the police. Those are the kind of standards we operate by.
Appreciate that. And the other thing I noticed in your testimony, you said that you verify separately everything that you hear or did hear over the scanners. So that's an added safeguard. Thank you very much. I really appreciate you being here today. It was very helpful.
It was interesting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Okay, Madam Clerk, do we have any remote testifiers, noting that it is 4:15?
Chair, there are none.
Thank you very much. Members, before we go into decision making, I do want to point out that I do have a hand-carried CD1 I wanted to read to you. Oh, thank you. Are there any, thank you so much. I've been told that I have to ask if there's any further in-person testifiers. Seeing none, thank you. Moving on to decision making. I recommend that Resolution 24-12 be amended to the hand-carried CD1. The hand-carried CD1 reads, and it should be on your desks, adds a new third whereas clause to reference the terrorist attacks of September 11, 2021, and the rethinking of communication strategies by public safety agencies. B, adds a new fifth whereas clause to reference the United States Department of Justice and the Criminal Justice Information Services security policy. C, adds a new sixth whereas clause to address compliance with the United States Department of Justice Criminal Justice Information Services, CJIS, security policy. D, adds a new seventh whereas clause to reference the United States Department of Health and the Human Services in compliance with the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, HIPAA. E, in the former fourth whereas clause, clarifies the use of encryption by the federal, state, and city government agencies. F, in the former fifth whereas clause, clarifies the accessibility of radio communication encryption to first responder agencies. G, in the former sixth whereas clause, adds the Honolulu Fire Department and Honolulu Emergency Services Department to the list of agencies using encrypted digital communication systems. H, in the former seventh whereas clause, clarifies the current communications available to the public and the media. I, in the former eighth whereas clause, clarifies the effect of the encrypted communications. J, in the former 12th whereas clause, adds a reference to the CJIS security policy and HIPAA. K, in the be it resolved clause that clarifies that media and public access to timely and accurate information. And L, makes miscellaneous technical non-substantive amendments. And just for everyone's information, I did receive these suggestions and I've adopted most of them from the Honolulu Police Department. Before we also go into decision making, I do want to just clarify on page 2 on the bottom, be it resolved by the City and County of Honolulu, City Council of the City and County of Honolulu, that each of the city's first responder agencies are urged to develop reasonable and effective policies and measures regarding media and public access to timely and accurate information that balance the interests of public with the needs of the respective agencies. So I'm simply urging the media and the first responders to work together. Right? I'll just leave it at that. Any discussion on the motion to amend?
Not on the motion to amend, but I just, before closing, I'd like, if there's anything I could just
Okay,
discuss, yeah.
absolutely. But any discussion, motion to amend? No? Seeing none, any objections? Hearing none, or any reservations? Seeing none, the resolution has been amended to the CD1. The chair recommends that Resolution 24-12 CD1 be reported out for adoption. Any discussion, Councilmember Okimoto?
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate, I love hearing the discussion about how the reason we're all here. I think we're all here, even if through different capacities, for the same reason, which is the safety of our community. So I really appreciate the discussion. First, I just want to thank our law enforcement and all of our first responders, the people, the men and women who go out every day, because as much as us in our capacities, nobody knows what we go through on a daily basis. I believe that's the same for them. And so I can completely empathize. I'm glad to hear that the 2 officers who were injured during the incident are safely out of the hospital now. So I just wanted to put a plug for that. And I know, Chief Logan, who was in the district, I know that the communities really appreciate all that they're doing. I think this is not this, when we talk about public safety, I know that that's what we're trying to accomplish in everything that we do in the discussion. And when I thought about this situation, I just hope that we can see the bigger picture, because when you look at what happened, unfortunately, the person that they were pursuing was somebody that was released on a lesson bail, and he had been prior release from jail. He was a felon. He shouldn't have had arms. And so I think in the efforts to really keep our communities safe, this is something that, yes, it's a means to make sure that we can feel safer. But we really, and it's not in our jurisdiction, unfortunately, but we can really advocate for what is wrong with the system that we keep on allowing these violent repeat offenders to be out on the streets, because it's putting not just our communities and our families at danger, at risk, but even our law officers. And so when I think about what can we do to really keep our community safe, there's the bigger picture that we need to look at. And I hope that we can have the continued discussion. This person shouldn't have been on the streets, and had he not been on the streets with an armed weapon, much of this wouldn't have happened. Now, that being said, we are subject to everything that happens, and we can't predict the future. But I appreciate you trying to make an effort to see what we can do to keep our communities safe. And I thank our chiefs here from all the departments and the directors who have come and are trying to work hard to find that balance. But I just want to put a plug in that when we talk about public safety, really the bigger picture is, what are we doing? What are we doing with our criminal system that's allowing these people to be out on the streets? And what are we doing? Why was he allowed to be off on a lesson bail? And these are the things that really will answer the bigger issues of how we can keep our communities safe. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I just wanted to thank you, Chief Logan, Chief Howell, Director Ireland, Deputy Director Dulong, and everybody here in the room coming out. I want to also thank the media, Mr. Mick, for coming out. And I think this was a really healthy discussion to have. And again, the resolution simply encourages us all to work together. And ultimately, as Councilmember Okimoto pointed out, that we really all do care about the safety of the public. And that's why I introduced the resolution. And I'm hoping that we actually do take this seriously and work together to figure this out. And perhaps in a few months, we can come back to the Public Safety Committee and maybe get a report to see what we actually have done. But again, thank you. Therefore, Chair recommends, again, that Resolution 24-12 CD1 be reported out for adoption. Any objections, reservations? Hearing none, so ordered. Thank you, members. There being no further business, the meeting is adjourned. It is now 4:22. Thank you, members.